If you believe the worst cruelty comes from strangers, listen closely. This grandmother lived in her own son's house, slept under his roof, yet went to bed hungry night after night, until silence itself became her loudest pain. Shanti never imagined that old age would feel this lonely. When her husband died, the house they had built together suddenly felt too big, too quiet. Every sound echoed, reminding her of everything she had lost. Ravi, her only son, stood beside her during the funeral, holding her trembling hands and promising again and again that she would never be alone. "You'll live with us, Ma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take care of you." Shanti believed him. A mother always does. She packed her life into one small metal trunk. A few faded saris, her wedding photograph wrapped carefully in cloth, old letters from her husband, and memories that weighed more than anything she carried. When she arrived at Ravi's house, she touched the doorway softly, whispering a prayer of gratitude. This was her son's home. She thought it would feel like her own in the beginning. Everything seemed fine. Ravi's wife, Meera, greeted her with a polite smile. On the first morning, Meera even bent down to touch Shanti's feet, a gesture that made Shanti's eyes fill with tears. "You are my mother now," Meera said sweetly. Shanti blessed her, heart full, believing she had been accepted. Shanti woke before sunrise every day, as she always had. She swept the floors quietly, careful not to disturb anyone. Sometimes she helped in the kitchen, chopping vegetables slowly, with her aging hands. Other times, Meera would tell her, "You rest, Ma," though the tone carried something cold beneath the words. Shanti didn't mind. She had learned long ago that adjusting was easier than insisting. Meals were shared at first. They all sat together on the floor. Shanti served Ravi extra portions, just like she had when he was a child. Watching him eat made her happy. It felt like purpose. It felt like home. But slowly, almost invisibly, things began to change. The first thing Shanti noticed was that she was eating last. Ravi and Meera would finish their meals, and only then would Meera bring a plate for Shanti. At first, Shanti thought nothing of it. "They are busy," she told herself. "Young people have their own ways." The portions were smaller, but she smiled and thanked Meera anyway. Then came the comments. "She eats so little anyway. At this age, food just makes people sick. Doctors say old people shouldn't eat much." The words were always said lightly, often with a small laugh, as if they were harmless jokes. Ravi was usually not paying attention. He was tired from work, lost in his phone, or already leaving for the office. Shanti swallowed her discomfort along with her food. Some nights, her stomach burned with hunger. She would lie on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the fan. Her belly growled loudly in the quiet room, and she pressed her palm against it, whispering to herself, "Sleep. It will pass." She drank water to fill the emptiness, pretending it was enough. She remembered the days when Ravi was small, when food was scarce but love was not. She had skipped meals so he could eat more. She had smiled while hungry then too. But that hunger felt different. That hunger had meaning. This one felt invisible as weeks passed. The food reduced further. Sometimes, there was only watery curry left by the time Shanti's plate arrived. Sometimes, just half a roti, torn unevenly. As if it were an afterthought, Shanti began pretending she wasn't hungry. "I already ate," she would say softly, even when she hadn't. Lying felt easier than asking. Meera noticed everything and nothing at the same time. If Shanti ever stood near the kitchen too long, Mira's eyes would narrow. "Why are you standing here?" she would ask. "Sit down. You don't need to work anymore." The words sounded caring, but they carried distance, like a door slowly closing. Shanti stopped entering the kitchen altogether as she began saving food in secret. Sometimes, she would hide a small piece of roti in the folds of her sari to eat later. Alone in her room, she felt ashamed doing it, like a child stealing. But hunger leaves little room for pride. She ate slowly, afraid that even those small bites would disappear too quickly. The house was always full of noise, yet Shanti felt alone. Ravi and Mira talked about expenses, plans, and their child's future. No one asked how Shanti was feeling. No one noticed how her bangles slipped down her wrists, how her face grew thinner, how her steps became slower. She missed her old neighborhood. There, even when people had little, they shared. A neighbor would knock just to offer a bowl of lentils. Hunger was spoken, and because it was shared, it hurt less. Here, hunger lived silently inside her. Growing heavier each day, Shanti prayed every morning, not for food, but for strength. "Let me endure without becoming bitter," she whispered. She believed bitterness would hurt her more than hunger ever could. One evening, Ravi came home early. Shanti's heart lifted. Maybe tonight they would all eat together. She waited, sitting quietly. Mira served Ravi generously, laughing as she spoke. When Ravi finished, he stood up to wash his hands, already distracted. Mira glanced at Shanti and placed a small plate near her without a word. Shanti looked at the plate. Her chest tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. She ate in silence, tears blurring her vision. Ravi didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. That night, Shanti lay awake longer than usual. Hunger clawed at her, but something else hurt more. She realized, slowly and painfully, that being unwanted hurt deeper than being hungry, and in that realization, something inside her began to quietly break. Time did not move forward for Shanti the way it did for others. For her, it settled into a slow, repeating ache. Days blended into one another, measured not by clocks or calendars, but by how much strength she had left in her body when night came. Hunger was no longer a visitor. It had become a companion, following her quietly from morning to evening. Her body began to change in ways she could not hide from herself, even if others refused to see it. Her saris hung loose on her frame. The mirror showed her cheekbones more sharply than before, her eyes deeper in their sockets. When she stood up too quickly, darkness crept into her vision, forcing her to grab the wall until the room stopped spinning. She told herself it was age. That excuse made everything easier to accept. Mira noticed the changes, but she explained them away without effort. Old age does this, she told anyone who mentioned Shanti's health. What can we do? Her voice carried no concern, only finality, as if suffering was natural, unavoidable, and therefore not worth addressing. Shanti stopped mentioning her discomfort entirely. Once, when her legs trembled while walking to the bathroom, she leaned against the doorframe to steady herself. Mira saw her and frowned. "Why are you standing like that?" she asked sharply. "Sit properly. You'll fall and create problems." Shanti nodded apologetically, as if weakness were a personal failure. Some afternoons, Shanti would sit by the small window in her room, watching the street below. Children played. Vendors shouted. Life moved on. She felt like she was watching the world from behind glass, present but not included. Her stomach ached constantly now. a dull pain that never fully left. She pressed her fingers against it and breathed slowly, remembering the advice she once gave herself during harder days. Endure quietly. One day, while sweeping the courtyard, her vision suddenly blurred. The broom slipped from her hand and hit the ground with a sharp sound. Before she could react, her legs gave way. The world tilted, then went dark. When Shanti opened her eyes, she was lying on the floor. The stone felt cold against her cheek. Mira stood above her, irritation written clearly on her face. "What is this now?" she said, hands on her hips. "You scared me for nothing." Shanti tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, uncooperative. Mira called Ravi at work. Her voice was annoyed, not worried. "Your mother fainted again," she said. "You should come home. People will talk." When Ravi arrived, breathless and concerned, he helped Shanti up, his hands shaking slightly. "Ma, why didn't you tell me you weren't feeling well?" he asked. Shanti smiled weakly. "It's nothing," she said. "Just old age." They took her to a small clinic nearby. The doctor examined her quietly, checking her pulse, her blood pressure, her eyes. He asked about her meals. Shanti hesitated, glancing at Mira. Ravi noticed the pause but said nothing. Mira answered quickly. "She eats fine. She just refuses food." The doctor didn't argue. He ordered a few tests and then spoke gently, but firmly. "She is malnourished," he said. "She needs regular, proper meals. Milk, fruits, balanced food. Otherwise, these fainting spells will become frequent." Ravi's chest tightened. He nodded, shame creeping into his face. Mira smiled politely. "Of course, doctor. We'll take care." For a brief moment, things changed. Milk appeared in the mornings. Fruits were placed on the table. Shanti was served full plates again. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, not just because she was hungry, but because she was afraid. Afraid this kindness would vanish as suddenly as it had come. And it did. Within a week, the fruit stopped coming. The milk glass was forgotten. Portions shrank again. Mira's voice returned to its familiar sharpness. "Doctors exaggerate," she said casually. "She's fine now." Shanti said nothing. She had tasted hope, and its disappearance hurt more than the hunger itself. The only one who seemed to notice was her grandson, Arav. He was young, but his eyes were observant. He watched his grandmother eat slowly, carefully, as if counting every bite. One evening, when Mira stepped away, Arav pushed his own plate toward her. "Dottie, take mine," he whispered. "You like roti." Shanti's heart clenched. She smiled and shook her head. "No, my child. You eat. I'm full." The lie tasted bitter. Mira returned and gently pulled Arav away. "Don't trouble your grandmother," she said sweetly. "She's already eaten." Shanti looked down at the floor, where crumbs lay unnoticed. Loneliness wrapped around her like a shawl she couldn't remove. She stopped telling stories. She stopped singing the old songs that once filled the house with warmth. Silence settled, deeper, heavier. Ravi sensed something was wrong, but fear held him back. He worked longer hours, came home later, avoided difficult conversations. He told himself everything was fine because admitting otherwise would demand action. One night, Ravi returned home unexpectedly early. As he stood near the bedroom door, he overheard Mira talking on the phone. Her voice was sharp, unguarded. "She's a burden," Mira said. "Always there, eating, falling sick. Old people should not live with young families." Ravi froze. Each word struck him like a slap. He looked into his mother's room later that night. Shanti slept on her thin mattress, her face calm, unaware of the words spoken behind her back. Ravi felt something inside him break. Guilt rose, followed by anger at Meera, at himself, at the years of silence he had chosen over responsibility. For the first time, he saw the truth clearly, and once seen, it could not be unseen. The next morning arrived quietly, but inside Ravi, a storm was already raging. He barely slept that night. Meera's words echoed in his head again and again, each time cutting deeper. Burden, eating, old people. He watched his mother through the half-open door as she folded her sari slowly, her movements careful, as if she were afraid of taking up too much space. A sharp wave of shame washed over him. At breakfast, Ravi did something he hadn't done in a long time. He sat down and watched. Meera served the plates without hesitation. A full plate for herself, another for Ravi. Then, almost as an afterthought, a small plate slid toward Shanti. The portion was noticeably less. Shanti reached for it without complaint, eyes lowered, fingers trembling slightly. Ravi felt his chest tighten. He cleared his throat. "Why is her food always less?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Meera looked up, surprised. She laughed lightly, the way she always did when deflecting. "She doesn't eat much," she said. "You know that." Ravi didn't look away. "Or you don't give her much." The room fell silent. Shanti's heart began to race. She wanted to stop him, to protect the fragile peace she had preserved for so long. "Ravi, it's fine," she said softly. "I'm not hungry." But Ravi shook his head. "No, Ma, it's not fine." Meera's smile disappeared. Her face hardened. "What is this?" she snapped. "Why are you suddenly questioning me? Are you listening to stories now?" Ravi's voice trembled, but he continued. "I see it now. I should have seen it earlier." Meera stood up abruptly. "So now I'm the villain," she said sharply. "I do everything for this house, and you accuse me." Shanti felt tears well in her eyes. Guilt wrapped around her like a chain. She had never wanted this. She had only wanted to survive quietly. Meera's words poured out, years of resentment spilling freely. She accused Shanti of poisoning Ravi against her, of pretending to be weak, of manipulating him with silence. The cruelty sounded uglier without its disguise, raw and unfiltered. Ravi listened, his hands clenched. For the first time, he didn't interrupt. When Meera finished, breathless and angry, he spoke quietly. "My mother fed me when she had nothing," he said. "If she is hungry, in my house, that is my failure." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. That afternoon, Ravi went into the kitchen himself. Shanti watched from the doorway, unsure, afraid. He cooked simple food, the way his mother used to. Rice, lentils, vegetables. He placed a full plate in front of her and sat beside her. "Eat, Ma," he said gently, properly. Shanti's hands shook as she lifted the first bite to her mouth. Tears fell into her food, blurring her vision. She wasn't just eating food. She was eating dignity, acknowledgement. Love she had feared was gone forever. Meera stayed in the bedroom, the door closed, the silence loud. But confronting the truth did not bring instant peace. The house became tense, thick with unspoken anger. Meera stopped speaking to Ravi unless necessary. Meals were eaten separately. Shanti felt like she was standing between two walls that might collapse at any moment. She blamed herself. If I had spoken earlier, she thought. If I had left quietly. Guilt pressed heavily on her chest, even though she had done nothing wrong. A few days later, Mira spoke again, her tone controlled, calculated. Maybe it's better if she stays somewhere else, she said casually during dinner. An old age home. They will take good care of her. She will get food on time. The words hit Shanti like a blow. Exile. Wrapped in concern, Shanti looked at Ravi, her eyes searching his face. She was ready to accept it. She had endured hunger. She could endure separation. She did not want to be the reason his marriage suffered. Ravi felt the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath. No, he said quietly. This is her home. Mira stared at him, shocked. You're choosing her over me? She asked. I'm choosing what's right, Ravi replied. The decision changed something fundamental. Lines were drawn, not perfectly, not without pain, but clearly. Ravi took responsibility for his mother's care. He made sure she ate with him. He bought groceries himself. He spoke up when he saw neglect. Mira resisted at first. The house was filled with cold silences and tense glances. But slowly, faced with Ravi's firmness, her behavior shifted. Not from kindness, but from necessity. Shanti's health began to improve. Strength returned little by little. Her steps steadied. Her eyes regained some of their light. She started humming again while folding clothes. The sound soft but hopeful. Hunger no longer lived in her stomach, but its memory stayed in her heart, and with that memory came a quiet understanding. Silence protects cruelty, but truth, once spoken, demands change. The days that followed felt different, not lighter, but clearer. The house no longer pretended everything was fine. The silence that once hid cruelty now carried honesty. And even though it was uncomfortable, it allowed Shanti to breathe again. She moved through the rooms more slowly, more carefully, but without the constant fear of being seen as a burden. Ravi took small but meaningful steps. He began waking up earlier to have tea with his mother. They sat together in the quiet mornings. Sunlight spilling through the window, steam rising from their cups. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. Just sitting together felt like an apology Ravi struggled to say out loud. Shanti understood. Mothers often do. Meals became predictable, simple, warm, sufficient. Shanti ate without hiding food, without saving pieces for later. The first few times, she felt anxious, as if the food might be taken away if she relaxed. But slowly, her body learned to trust again. Her hands stopped shaking. The hollowness in her stomach faded, replaced by a gentle fullness she had forgotten was possible. Mira watched all of this from a distance. She spoke less, moved sharply, her actions mechanical. Her kindness did not return suddenly. There were no apologies, no tears of regret, but the open cruelty stopped. That alone felt like a victory Shanti had not dared to hope. For sometimes, Mira's resentment surfaced, in small ways. A plate placed down to hard, a sigh heavy with meaning. Shanti noticed everything but responded with silence. She had survived worse. Now, she chose peace where she could. Her health improved steadily. The faintness disappeared. She began taking short walks outside, leaning lightly on Ravi's arm at first, then on her own. Neighbors commented on the color returning to her face. Shanti smiled politely, not explaining how close she had come to fading away completely. One afternoon, while sitting in the courtyard, Shanti watched her grandson Arav play. His laughter filled the air, free and bright. He ran toward her and climbed into her lap without hesitation. Shanti held him close, breathing in the warmth of his small body. For the first time in months, she felt truly present. That evening, something unexpected happened. Meera entered Shanti's room quietly. Shanti looked up, surprised. Meera held a bowl of soup, warm and carefully prepared. She placed it on the small table beside Shanti's bed. "It's still hot," she said flatly. There was no softness in her voice, no apology in her eyes. But the gesture itself felt heavy with meaning. Shanti nodded. "Thank you," she replied gently. Meera lingered for a moment, as if wanting to say something more, then turned and left. Shanti stared at the bowl for a long time before lifting the spoon. Sometimes, change does not arrive with words. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, unsure of itself. That night, Shanti lay awake, not from hunger, but from thought. She reflected on how easily a person could disappear inside a home full of people. How love, when left unspoken and unprotected, could be overshadowed by convenience and comfort. She felt no anger now, only a deep tiredness and a quiet resolve. Ravi, too, was changing. He began questioning habits he had never examined. Why he stayed silent. Why he assumed things would fix themselves. He realized that being a good son required more than affection. It required courage. He promised himself he would never again look away when someone he loved was hurting. The house slowly found a new rhythm. Not joyful, not perfect, but stable. Shanti resumed small routines that made her feel alive. Watering plants in the morning, folding laundry while humming old songs, sitting with Arav to help him with his homework. These simple acts stitched her back into the fabric of daily life. One evening, as Ravi returned from work, he found his mother sitting near the window, watching the sky change colors. "Ma," he said softly, sitting beside her. "I'm sorry." Shanti placed her hand over his. "You saw," she replied. "That matters." Tears filled Ravi's eyes. He realized then how close he had come to losing her, not to death, but to invisibility. The house was still learning how to heal. Some wounds remain tender. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But for Shanti, the hardest part was over. Hunger had been defeated, not just in her body, but in her spirit. And in the quiet strength she carried forward, she became more than a survivor. She became a reminder that dignity, once reclaimed, can transform an entire home. Asterisk. The house no longer felt like a place she needed to shrink herself to fit into. Shanti noticed it first in the smallest moments. She reached for a glass of water without hesitation. She walked into the kitchen without fear of being questioned. She spoke when spoken to, and sometimes she spoke even when she wasn't asked. These changes were quiet, almost invisible to others, but to her, they felt like victories hard won. Her body continued to heal, but more importantly, her spirit. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest slowly loosened. She slept better now, deeper, without waking in the night to the ache of hunger or the dread of the next day. Morning light felt gentler. Even the walls of the house seemed less heavy. Ravi became more attentive, not out of guilt alone, but out of understanding. He noticed how his mother paused before speaking, how years of silence had taught her to measure every word. When she spoke, he listened fully, without distraction. Sometimes he asked her about his childhood, about his father, about things he had never taken the time to hear before. Each conversation stitched something broken back together. Meera remained distant, but distant was better than cruel. Over time, the sharpness in her behavior dulled. She no longer counted portions. She no longer made remarks disguised as concern. Occasionally, she would ask Shanti simple questions. Did you take your medicine? Do you want tea? The words were plain, but they carried a fragile truce. Shanti did not expect affection. She had learned not to hunger for what others could not give. Respect was enough. Peace was enough. One afternoon, Ravi brought home a small photo frame. Inside was an old photograph of Shanti and her husband, taken decades ago. He placed it on the shelf in the living room. It belongs here, he said simply. Shanti touched the frame with trembling fingers. For the first time since moving into the house, she felt seen not as a responsibility, but as a person with a past, a history that mattered. Neighbors noticed the change too. They commented on Shanti's smile, on how she seemed stronger, more present. She responded politely, never sharing the truth of what she had endured. She did not want sympathy. She wanted closure. One evening, as the family sat together, Arav climbed into Shanti's lap and wrapped his arms around her neck. "Dottie," he said innocently, "you don't look sad anymore." The words landed gently but deeply. Shanti swallowed, her throat tight. "I'm not, my child," she replied, stroking his hair. And for the first time, it was true. Later that night, Mira stood near the doorway, watching them. Something unreadable passed across her face. She said nothing, but she did not look away either. Days turned into months. Festivals came and went. Shanti participated again, lighting lamps, offering prayers, cooking small dishes with care. Her laughter returned, cautious at first, then fuller. The house, once tense and brittle, softened around her presence. One night, Ravi found his mother, sitting alone, looking thoughtful. "What are you thinking about, Ma?" he asked. Shanti took a moment before answering. "I was thinking about hunger," she said quietly. Ravi's face tightened. "I'm sorry," she stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Not just food," she continued. "Hunger for kindness. Hunger to be noticed. Hunger to belong. Those hungers hurt more than an empty stomach." Ravi listened, tears welling in his eyes. "I stayed silent because I didn't want to break the family," Shanti said. "But silence almost broke me instead." Those words stayed with Ravi long after that night. Life did not become perfect. There were still disagreements. There were still moments of discomfort. But cruelty no longer ruled the house. Boundaries had been drawn, and dignity had taken root. Shanti grew older, as all people do. But she no longer felt erased by age. She felt anchored. She spent her afternoons telling Arav stories. From her childhood, stories of resilience, of loss, of love, that endured even in hardship. He listened with wide eyes, absorbing lessons he would one day understand fully in quiet moments. Shanti reflected on everything she had survived. She realized that endurance had kept her alive, but being seen had given her life meaning again. She never confronted Mira. She never demanded apologies. Some battles, she knew, were not worth reopening. Healing, for her, came from acceptance and the reclaiming of her own worth. One morning, as sunlight filled the house, Shanti stood at the doorway, breathing deeply. This house had once starved her, not just of food, but of compassion. Now, it fed her something far more important, the right to exist without apology. Hunger had taught her patience. Silence had taught her endurance. But dignity had taught her strength. And in that strength, Shanti finally found peace.